What would you do if the girl delivering your lunch solved $1 million tech crisis in seconds, then vanished, only to return and bring your entire company to its knees? It was supposed to be just another hectic Tuesday at Tech Corp's control center. Red lights blinked furiously across the massive digital dashboard, warning messages piling up faster than the engineers could clear them. Dozens of client companies were paralyzed, banks, hospitals, airports, because the system that powered them all had crashed nearly 3 hours ago. 20 of the company's top engineers had been working non-stop to find the root cause, but so far, nothing. Frustration buzzed in the air like static. "Damn it!" shouted Richard Cole, the company's chief technology officer, slamming his palm on the edge of the table. "You call yourselves engineers? If you're so smart, solve it now." Silence fell over the room, thick and heavy. Everyone's eyes dropped to their screens, pretending to type, pretending not to feel the weight of failure. And then, the door opened. In walked a young woman, barely over 5 feet tall, her thermal backpack slung over one shoulder. Her name tag read Jasmine Carter. "I have a lunch order for Richard Cole," she said, scanning the room with hesitant eyes. Richard barely glanced at her. "Over here," he grunted, waving her over with annoyance. She approached the table and placed the food down, but her eyes flicked to the central screen behind him. Lines of code. A flashing error code. TXN buffer override 47. She tilted her head slightly. Then she spoke softly, without arrogance, just honest observation. "Excuse me, but that error looks like a cache memory conflict," Jasmine said, brushing a lock of curly hair behind her ear. "You're trying to reboot the primary server without clearing the pending transaction buffer." The room went still. Every head slowly turned toward her, as if she'd just spoken in a language none of them recognized. Some engineers blinked. Others scoffed under their breath. A few smirked at one another. Richard turned slowly, raising an eyebrow. "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" he asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. Jasmine stood her ground. "The errors from a transaction buffer conflict. The system can't clear the memory because the queue is still active. If you manually flush the buffer before rebooting, it should restart clean." Richard barked a laugh. "And you figured that out by glancing at the screen for 2 seconds while delivering sandwiches?" She shrugged gently. "Just something I learned on my own." "You're a delivery girl, not an engineer," Richard snapped. "I bet you didn't even finish high school." Jasmine didn't flinch. "Try it. Just clear the buffer, you'll see." Snickers echoed through the room. One of the engineers, Logan Pierce, crossed his arms and sneered, "Sweetheart, this isn't your kitchen microwave. This is a live infrastructure system that moves millions of dollars per minute. Leave the real work to the pros." But something in Jasmine's calm eyes unsettled them. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. "All right," she said, adjusting the strap of her backpack. "But when the system is back up and running in 2 minutes, remember this moment." Richard scoffed again. 2 minutes? We've been at this for 3 hours. If this works, I'll personally cook your next delivery." Without waiting, one of the junior engineers, curious more than anything, followed Jasmine's suggestion. Buffer cleared. Command line entered. Server rebooted. A heartbeat passed, then another. Suddenly the dashboard shifted. Red turned to yellow, then to green. All systems online. The room gasped. 20 of the city's highest-paid engineers stood frozen, watching as a food delivery girl solved in seconds what they couldn't in hours. Richard's face turned pale. His jaw clenched. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Beginner's luck," he muttered. Jasmine offered a polite smile in return, one that also didn't reach her eyes. "If you say so," she said quietly, and turned to leave. But as she stepped out, the unspoken truth clung to every corner of that room. She had just embarrassed them all. And Richard Cole would never forget it. 3 days had passed, but Richard Cole couldn't stop replaying that moment in his mind. The moment a delivery girl, Jasmine Carter, had pointed out an error that 20 of his top engineers missed. Worse than that, she was right. The system came back online exactly 2 minutes after they followed her suggestion. The blinking red screens, the frozen infrastructure, the pressure from executives, it had all vanished because of her. And now, everyone at TechCorp was whispering about the girl with the backpack who saved the company. Richard couldn't accept it. He was a man who had spent 2 decades in tech, held degrees from MIT, built systems for banks and governments. He made over $200,000 a year. He wore tailored suits and lived in a penthouse. He was respected, feared, admired, and now his authority had been undermined in public by someone he viewed as insignificant. "She didn't even belong in that room," he muttered under his breath, pacing his office. "What does she think she is, correcting me?" There was a knock at the door. Logan Pierce, his senior engineer and longtime ally, stepped in with a sly grin. "I got her name," Logan said. Richard raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "Jasmine Carter." 24 years old, works for 3 different delivery apps, lives in East Ridge. He paused for effect. "She dropped out of college, was studying computer science but couldn't afford tuition." Richard scoffed. "Typical. Dreams too big, no foundation. Probably memorized some code from YouTube." He stared out the floor-to-ceiling window of his 23rd floor office. "You know what really bothers me?" he said after a moment. "People like her think they can walk into our world and speak to us like equals. She doesn't understand there's a hierarchy, a natural order of things." Logan laughed, echoing the sentiment. "She got lucky, nothing more." But Richard wasn't laughing inside. His pride had been bruised, and wounded ego is a dangerous thing in the hands of powerful men. That night, he made a few calls. He spoke with executives at every food delivery app that served TechCorp. As a long-time premium corporate client, he had influence more than most realized. He told them Jasmine Carter had behaved inappropriately, that she had been disrespectful to staff, made false technical claims, and disrupted company operations. "As the CTO of one of your largest clients," he said coolly, "I can't allow someone like that to keep representing your brand on our property." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even sound angry. Just matter-of-fact, as if he were doing them a favor. By the following afternoon, Jasmine's worst fears came true. Her phone lit up with 3 notifications in a row. "Your account has been suspended pending investigation. We regret to inform you that you are no longer eligible to deliver through our platform. Your access has been revoked due to client complaints." No details. No appeal, no income. Just like that, she was erased. That evening, Jasmine sat alone in her small kitchen, the fading light casting long shadows across a stack of unopened medical bills. Her mother, Miss Thelma, had just returned from another round of chemotherapy, her frame thin, her movement slow. "Honey, what's wrong?" her mother asked, sensing the shift in her daughter's energy. "Nothing, Mom," Jasmine replied, forcing a smile. "Just a problem at work, I'll fix it." She lied not out of shame, but protection. Miss Thelma had fought too hard, suffered too much. Jasmine wouldn't burden her with the details of what had just happened. But as she hugged her mother gently, feeling the fragility of the woman who had raised her with love and strength, something inside her snapped. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in resolve. That night, long after her mother had gone to sleep, Jasmine pulled out her old laptop, the same one she'd bought second-hand, with money borrowed from a friend during college. It had scratches. The battery was weak. The keyboard sometimes stuck. But it was hers. She plugged it in, opened her code editor, and began to type. For months, she'd been using her programming skills to optimize delivery routes to earn a few extra dollars here and there. She'd written simple logic tools, back-end modifiers, lightweight apps. She'd solved problems others never noticed. But tonight, she wasn't writing for money. She was writing for something much bigger. Every keystroke carried years of humiliation. Every line of code was fueled by exhaustion, disappointment, and fire. This wasn't just about Tech Corp anymore. This was about building something that couldn't be taken from her. For the first hour, she sat still. For the second, she picked up speed. By the third hour, her fingers moved like lightning, driven by a vision only she could see. And somewhere between the silence of 3 a.m. and the first birdsong outside her window, a new idea was born. An idea that would grow into something no one, especially not Richard Cole, would see coming. Before the backpack, before the delivery routes, before the red screens and stunned engineers, there was a girl named Jasmine Carter, sitting in the back of a crowded community college classroom, her notebook half filled with equations and her eyes full of dreams. She had always loved solving problems. As a child, while other kids played video games, Jasmine took apart old radios from the junkyard and reassembled them, often with pieces missing, yet somehow working better than before. Her teachers called her gifted, but she never liked the word. She wasn't looking for praise, she was looking for answers, and in college she found them. She didn't come from money, she didn't come from legacy, but she came with fire, and for 2.5 years, she aced every programming class, built projects that made her professors double-check the code, and stayed up night after night learning not just how to code, but how systems think. She was on track for a degree in computer science. She had offers lined up for internships. She had professors ready to write glowing recommendations. Until one morning changed everything. Her phone rang at 6:12 a.m. Her mother, Miss Thelma, had collapsed in the kitchen. The diagnosis came swiftly and cruelly, stage 3 breast cancer, and just like that, the world Jasmine had been building began to fall apart. They had no insurance, no savings, no support system, just Jasmine. The tuition bill arrived 2 weeks later, $4,800 due. The hospital bill arrived the next day, $12,000 and climbing. She had to choose, and it was no choice at all. Jasmine dropped out of school. She picked up shifts at a diner in the mornings, cleaned offices at night, and started food delivery during lunch hours. Anything to bring in money, anything to keep the treatments going. She watched her classmates move on without her, watched her professors email, asking why she'd disappeared. But Jasmine didn't reply. She didn't have the words to explain what it meant to sacrifice your future for someone who once sacrificed hers for you. Every night, after putting her mother to bed, she'd sit at a makeshift desk, a cardboard box flipped upside down, and open the old laptop she'd bought from a pawn shop. It barely held a charge. The screen had a faint flicker in the top left corner, but it was a portal, a lifeline. While the world forgot her, Jasmine didn't stop learning. She couldn't afford textbooks, so she downloaded PDFs from open forums. She couldn't pay for courses, so she watched lectures on YouTube at 1.5x speed. She didn't have classmates anymore, so she taught herself through trial and error. She built small systems just to see if she could. She tested route optimization algorithms for her own deliveries, shaving off 22% of drive time. She created batch order prediction models for lunch rushes. She wrote code that helped her survive, not just study. Her mother would wake up sometimes at 2 in the morning and see Jasmine still at the screen, eyes red, fingers twitching. "Baby," she'd whisper weakly, "you need sleep." "I'll sleep later," Jasmine would reply. "You just keep fighting." In those quiet hours, Jasmine wasn't just coding. She was clawing her way back, not for the diploma, not for the applause, but to prove that brilliance isn't reserved for those with silver spoons and clean resumes. It lives in the girl who chooses family over a future and still finds a way to build something remarkable. But no one saw her. Not the delivery app supervisors who only knew her by username, not the customers who judged her by her hoodie and sneakers, not the executives who refused to look past her job title. To them, she was just another brown-skinned girl with a food bag and no degree. They didn't know that the Kay Williams who posted on open-source forums with razor-sharp debugging solutions was Jasmine. They didn't know that several delivery startups had quietly integrated logic she'd posted for free, that her algorithms had been downloaded thousands of times under anonymous aliases, that she'd contributed code to GitHub projects that some of TechCorp's engineers were using without even knowing it. She wasn't just qualified, she was better. But qualifications don't matter when you're invisible. When you walk into a corporate tower with a delivery bag, people see your uniform, not your skill. They see your skin, not your story. And when you speak up, when you dare to know something, they don't ask how you learned it. They ask why you had the audacity to speak. That's what had happened at TechCorp. Jasmine didn't embarrass them because she was wrong. She embarrassed them because she was right, and she wasn't supposed to be. She wasn't supposed to speak their language. She wasn't supposed to see what they couldn't. She wasn't supposed to exist in their world, let alone outsmart it. So they punished her the only way they knew how. They cut off her access to survival. But what they didn't realize was that Jasmine Carter had never been handed anything. She had already built her mind in the shadows, brick by brick, and if they thought taking away a job would stop her, they had no idea what they had just awakened. For the first time in weeks, Jasmine Carter let herself feel something besides survival. It wasn't quite hope yet, but it wasn't despair either. She sat by the kitchen window, her laptop humming quietly beside her. Lines of code filled the screen, glowing against the darkness. Her mom, Miss Thelma, had fallen asleep on the couch, her head wrapped in a scarf, her hand still clutching Jasmine's after a rough chemo session. Jasmine was exhausted, but something inside her refused to sleep. Ever since she'd been banned from the delivery apps, something had shifted. She wasn't just writing code to save money or optimize lunch routes anymore. Now she was building something deliberate. Something that could expose flaws deep hidden once in big systems, especially one in particular, TechCorp. They thought they had silenced her. Instead, they had awakened a part of her that even she didn't know existed. That night, she received a message. It came through her burner developer account profile she used to answer tech questions on obscure forums. From G. Howard TC subject, we need to talk. Hi Jasmine, my name is Grace. I work at TechCorp. I was in the room the day you fixed the system. And I know what Richard Cole did to you. He brags about it like it was a joke. I have something to show you. Please meet me. You can choose the place? Jasmine stared at the screen. It could be a trap. It could be someone messing with her. Or worse, it could be someone trying to finish the job that Richard started. But then again, there was something in the tone. It wasn't corporate, it was human. She hesitated. Then typed, tomorrow, 6 p.m, Cafe Luna. Back corner booth, come alone. The next day, Jasmine arrived early. Cafe Luna was one of those quiet, mom-and-pop places, tucked between glass skyscrapers and overpriced boutiques. She wore a simple hoodie, kept her backpack close, and chose the seat where she could see the entire room. At 6:03, a woman entered. Asian American, late 30s, clean-cut blazer over a faded TechCorp badge clipped to her belt. She scanned the room until her eyes landed on Jasmine. She walked over slowly. Jasmine? Jasmine nodded, but didn't smile. You Grace? Yes, thank you for meeting me. Grace Howard sat down and, without a word, pulled out her phone. She placed it between them and hit play. Jasmine listened as Richard Cole's voice filled the tiny booth. She embarrassed me in front of the entire team. I made sure she got blacklisted. Nobody like that should get to correct people like us. We have standards. There's a hierarchy for a reason. There was laughter. Logan Pierce's voice joining in. Jasmine's chest tightened. Hearing it the way they spoke about her, the certainty that she didn't belong, it wasn't shocking, but it still cut deep. She looked up at Grace. You recorded this? Grace nodded. I didn't plan to, but the moment he started bragging about what he did to you, I hit record. And I've been holding on to it ever since. Why? Jasmine asked quietly. Grace looked down at her hands, then back at Jasmine. Because I've been where you are. She took a breath. 3 years ago, I corrected Richard during a presentation to investors. I was calm, professional. But he didn't speak to me for 6 months afterward. Tried to have me written up for insubordination. The only reason I'm still there is because I had union protection. You didn't. Jasmine's eyes softened slightly. Still guarded, but no longer alone. I've been watching, Grace continued. I know what you're doing. I know you're not just building something for fun. You're planning something, and I want to help. She pulled out a folded paper and slid it across the table. A list of TechCorp's top clients, big names, medical systems, financial institutions, airlines, names Jasmine recognized from years of reading back-end documentation and support forums. They all rely on Richard's architecture, Grace said, but if someone found vulnerabilities, real ones, Jasmine's fingers tightened on the list. They'd have grounds to walk away, Grace finished. That night, back home, Jasmine stood in the doorway of her mother's room. Miss Thelma stirred awake. You okay, baby? Jasmine smiled faintly. Yeah, Mom. I think I found an ally. She walked back to her desk, unfolded the list, and placed it beside her keyboard. One by one, she started researching each company, their systems, their dependencies, their weak points. She wasn't hacking, she wasn't stealing, she was observing publicly available information. Running diagnostics from the outside, finding the cracks nobody else saw. And what she discovered? Terrifying. Richard Cole had built everything fast and flashy but not safe. Jasmine found dozens of vulnerabilities, insecure endpoints, outdated encryption protocols, failure to sandbox internal applications. These were the kinds of things a skilled attacker could exploit. These were problems that could cost companies millions. She documented everything. Then she started building a tool of her own, an automated scanning platform, lightweight but powerful. A system that could identify and report vulnerabilities in real time. Nothing illegal. Nothing shady, just a girl with a laptop revealing the truth. And so began the quiet revolution. Using a series of aliases and developer handles, Jasmine reached out to CTOs and security directors of those companies. She offered free audits. Most ignored her. Some replied with vague interest, but a few, the curious, the paranoid, the smart agreed. And when they ran her tool, they saw the truth. TechCorp's systems were riddled with holes. Holes Richard Cole had denied existed. Holes Jasmine had mapped from her kitchen table. Jasmine Carter didn't make any noise. There were no headlines. No tweets, no public accusations, no threats. Just silence and code. While Richard Cole walked the halls of TechCorp with smug confidence, Jasmine was already 10 steps ahead, orchestrating a quiet rebellion from her modest kitchen table. She had no degree, no title, no office, but she had something far more dangerous, the truth. And now she had the tools to make it speak louder than any voice. Her audit platform was simple in appearance, just a clean web-based interface with one input field. But beneath it was a powerful set of custom-built diagnostic protocols. She had spent sleepless nights feeding it code, fine-tuning its detection logic, testing it on herself, tearing apart her own work before turning it loose. The software was designed to scan external systems legally and ethically and flag common vulnerabilities. Unencrypted API endpoints, cross-site scripting weaknesses, inactive session tokens, outdated SSL certificates, misconfigured access controls. But here was the kicker. It didn't just flag the issues. It mapped their potential cost. For every bug it found, the system generated an estimate of what that flaw could cost a company if exploited in dollars, in downtime, in damaged trust. And when Jasmine ran it against the architecture built by TechCorp, the results were catastrophic. The first target was a medium-sized healthcare tech provider. Jasmine had learned from Grace Howard that they were deeply dependent on TechCorp's infrastructure. She sent a carefully worded email through a professional alias. Dear Mr. Carlson, I'm a cybersecurity analyst offering complimentary external vulnerability scans for companies that rely on outsourced infrastructure. I've identified some preliminary concerns and would like to offer you a free, non-intrusive audit. No strings attached, just truth. At first, there was no response. 3 days later, she got a reply. We'll run your scan. Our CTO is curious. So she ran the scan. Within seconds, the report returned 11 critical vulnerabilities, including unsecured patient data endpoints. 2 hours later, the CTO replied again. Who are you? And how the hell did you find this? Jasmine smiled as she typed. Someone you never hired. But someone who sees what others miss. She didn't demand anything. Didn't ask for a contract. Just attached a PDF report and let the numbers speak. $1.3 million in potential exposure, 72-hour average downtime, risk, 3 possible HIPAA violations if exploited. She signed it simply, K. Williams, no last name, just enough for Richard Cole to know. From there, the wave began. Using dummy email accounts, Jasmine offered free audits to dozens of companies on Grace's list. A surprising number responded. Some out of fear, some out of curiosity, others just because they'd been burned by TechCorp before and were open to second opinions. Each audit returned similar results, vulnerabilities everywhere, and every time Jasmine hit send on a report, she wasn't just pointing out flaws. She was placing another crack in Richard Cole's empire. Meanwhile, at TechCorp, Richard remained oblivious. To him, the Jasmine incident was ancient history, a hiccup, a joke, something he had handled. The apps had blacklisted her. The problem had disappeared. But he began to notice a trend. Clients growing colder, meetings being postponed, questions about system integrity becoming more frequent. Just competitors stirring up fear, he told Logan Pierce. But even Logan was starting to sweat. You hear about Care Meditech? Logan asked one day. They cancelled their renewal. Said they got an audit from a third party, someone named K. Williams. Richard's smile faded. The name stabbed like a needle under his skin. Back in her apartment, Jasmine tracked the damage not with joy, not with revenge, but with precision. Each company that dropped TechCorp didn't know her story. They didn't need to. All they knew was that someone more competent than Richard Cole had found what he couldn't, and they responded accordingly. By the end of the week, 6 companies had quietly begun shifting away from TechCorp. 12 more were reviewing her reports. 3 had already started internal investigations. One CTO asked if she was available for consulting. But Jasmine said no, not yet. She wasn't done. Not until the final brick of Richard's empire had fallen. At night, her mother, Miss Thelma, would peek into her room. "You're still working, baby?" Jasmine nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. "This thing you're building," her mom said softly, "it's going to change everything, isn't it?" Jasmine paused, looked up. "It's not about changing the world, Mom. It's about making the people who ignored me feel the consequences they thought I'd never be able to deliver." Miss Thelma smiled weakly. "Then make it count." And Jasmine did. She worked in silence. She coded without rest. She studied system logs, DNS histories, back-end software dependencies. She used nothing illegal. She accessed nothing private. She simply outperformed every expert in the game. Because brilliance isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like a girl in a hoodie with cracked knuckles and tired eyes. Sometimes it looks like a black woman who was told she didn't belong, proving that she never needed permission in the first place. And while Richard Cole poured another cup of coffee, preparing for another meeting with executives growing increasingly impatient, Jasmine Carter was preparing the first public blow. It was almost time. The call came on a Thursday morning. Richard Cole was halfway through his usual routine dark roast coffee, inbox triage, pretending he wasn't drowning in unread client complaints when his assistant burst into the office, face pale. "Sir," she said breathlessly, "Megacore's CTO is on line 1.
He says it's urgent." Richard didn't flinch. Megacore was one of TechCorp's largest and oldest clients. If they had a problem, it probably meant something small, another update gone sideways, or maybe a server refresh delay. He took the call without hesitation. "Richard Cole speaking." "Richard," the voice said sharply, "we need to talk. Now." It was Miguel Rodriguez, a man known for staying calm even during crisis scenarios. But today, his tone was clipped, angry. "We've just received a third-party audit from a security analyst named K. Williams, and we have questions." Richard's hand froze on the desk. That name again. "I'm sorry," he said slowly. Who?" "K. Williams," Rodriguez repeated. "The audit shows major vulnerabilities in the architecture you deployed." "We're talking about legacy port exposure, admin route misconfigurations, API key leakage. You told us these didn't exist. I can assure you, all of our systems passed compliance checks." "I'm not talking about compliance, Richard. I'm talking about real-world exposure."
"I have the logs, I have the timestamps. The evidence is airtight." Richard's throat went dry. "I'll look into it right away." "Do that," Rodriguez snapped. "And know this, if we confirm that you knew about these issues and failed to inform us, we'll be terminating our contract immediately." The line went dead. Richard stood there for several seconds, the phone still pressed to his ear. He slowly lowered it and stared out the window. K. Williams. He hadn't heard that name since Jasmine Carter walked out of the control room, backpack still on her shoulder, eyes full of quiet defiance. No, it couldn't be her. She was just a delivery girl. Right? By noon, 3 more calls had come in, 3 different clients. Same name, same audit reports. That afternoon, Logan Pierce stormed into Richard's office, a stack of papers in hand. "We have a problem," he said grimly. 12 companies have requested early contract termination, all citing security concerns from independent audits. Richard snatched the papers and scanned the list. All major accounts, all companies dependent on TechCorp infrastructure, and every one of them had received audits from the same source, K. Williams. "What kind of operation is this?" he muttered. "Who the hell is this person?" Logan hesitated. "We ran a name search." Richard looked up sharply. "And? There's no K. Williams in any known firm, no LinkedIn profile. No press, no certs in the National Registry, just silence." But Richard knew. He didn't want to admit it, but deep down, he knew. This wasn't some corporate spy or whistleblower. This was her. Jasmine Carter. And she wasn't just back. She was dismantling him. For the rest of the day, Richard tried to regain control. He called clients, sent emails, promised patches, dismissed the audits as overreactions from freelancers trying to make a name. But no one was listening. Because the audits weren't vague. They were precise, too precise. Jasmine's reports included system logs, vulnerability timelines, potential damage estimates, things only a deeply skilled expert could uncover. Clients weren't just alarmed, they were furious. Because Richard hadn't just failed to fix the issue, he'd denied they existed. By Friday morning, the collapse had begun. A joint memo from 5 major clients was sent to TechCorp's board of directors, requesting an external investigation into Richard Cole's leadership. Internally, TechCorp employees were buzzing. People whispered in hallways, Slack channels lit up with questions, and in the middle of it all, Grace Howard sat quietly at her desk, watching everything unfold. She had known this day would come, but even she was surprised by the efficiency of Jasmine's strategy. This wasn't revenge. It was a surgical strike. Back in her apartment, Jasmine watched the fallout unfold on her screen. She didn't smile. Didn't gloat. She simply updated her records. 12 confirmed losses, she muttered, marking another name off the list.
Her mother, Miss Thelma, walked in with a cup of tea. "You working again, baby?" "Just checking on something," Jasmine said. Her mother looked at her gently.
"You look different."
Jasmine turned to her.
"Different how?" "Like someone who finally stopped waiting for permission."
Jasmine exhaled. Maybe she had. Maybe, after years of being underestimated, disrespected, and ignored, she had finally decided to take up space. To move like she belonged. Because she did. At Tech Corp, Richard barely slept. Each hour brought another contract cancellation, another legal notice, another media inquiry. A reporter from Techline magazine had left him a voicemail. "Mr. Cole, we've received multiple reports from companies citing your negligence and a rogue security analyst named Kay Williams. We'd like to hear your side before publishing." He didn't respond. Because what could he say? He had been outsmarted, outflanked, outclassed by a girl he had mocked, blacklisted, erased, and now she was holding the receipts. It happened on a Monday morning. The kind of morning when people shuffle in late, clutching coffee cups, trying to pretend they care about another week of meetings, code reviews, and polite corporate lies. But this Monday at Tech Corp would be remembered for something else. A single email. Subject line: transparency and integrity, a necessary conversation. Sent at exactly 9:01 a.m. From Grace Howard. To all employees. Dear colleagues, as someone who has served this company for 5 years, I believe in its mission. But I also believe in truth. And after witnessing what has unfolded over the past few months, I can no longer stay silent. On date, during a critical system failure, a young woman named Jasmine Carter who was delivering food identified the issue in seconds. Our CTO, Richard Cole, not only dismissed her insight, but later used his influence to blacklist her from every delivery platform in the city. He laughed about it, bragged about it, called her unqualified and beneath us. I have attached the audio recording of that conversation to this email. What Mr. Cole didn't know was that Jasmine Carter is not just a delivery girl. She is the security analyst known as Kay Williams, the same one whose audits are now being used by our former clients to terminate millions of dollars in contracts. We didn't just silence talent, we destroyed it, and now we're paying the price. You deserve to know the truth. Sincerely, Grace Howard. By 9:07, the office was in chaos. The audio clip, just under 2 minutes long, made its way through Slack channels, group chats, even LinkedIn. Richard's voice was unmistakable. She embarrassed me. I made sure she got banned. People like her don't get to talk to people like us that way. Some employees stared at their screens in disbelief. Others pushed away from their desks, pacing, shocked. A few sat quietly, blinking back guilt, because they remembered that day. They remembered Jasmine standing in the control room, calm, clear. And how they had laughed along with Richard instead of listening. At 10:12 a.m., a second bomb dropped. Jasmine Carter walked through the front doors of Tech Corp. She wasn't alone. At her side was a calm, grey-haired attorney with a leather briefcase. Behind them, 2 reporters, one from Techline, one from The Atlantic. Their cameras were rolling. She was wearing black jeans, a fitted blazer, and no delivery bag in sight. She was no longer asking to be heard. She was here to be reckoned with. Security froze when they saw her. "I have an appointment," she said simply. "Under what name?" "Jasmine Carter. I'm here on behalf of the Tech Corp board." The receptionist blinked. "Board?" Her attorney stepped forward. "Following recent client losses and internal misconduct allegations, Ms. Carter has been contracted to perform a full external audit. She now has temporary clearance for all non-classified systems." The guard picked up the phone, unsure whether to call Richard or HR or both. But it was too late. The news was spreading floor by floor. Is that her? The delivery girl? No, that's Kay. Williams. She's here with a lawyer. Yo, check Slack. There's press outside. Richard Cole stormed out of his office, red-faced and stunned. He stopped dead when he saw Jasmine standing in the lobby, looking directly at him. You, he spat. You can't be here. Security! I didn't break in, Jasmine replied, her voice steady. I was invited by the same people who are wondering how you let 23 critical vulnerabilities go undetected for the past 8 months. The reporters turned on their cameras. A journalist stepped forward. Mr. Cole, is it true you used your position to retaliate against Mrs. A. Carter after she exposed a system failure? That's a lie, he shouted. Jasmine's attorney opened a folder and calmly handed over a printed report. Would you like to explain these logs, Mr. Cole? These show deliberate attempts to suppress error data from client dashboards. Richard paled. That's not what it looks like. Oh, Jasmine said, pulling out her laptop. Because I'd be happy to walk you through it. Every line, every timestamp, every flaw you claimed didn't exist. She connected to the projector in the conference room without waiting. On the screen appeared detailed technical reports, complete with error codes, unpatched exploits, and risk assessments, all tied to systems Tech Corp had sold to clients for years. Behind the glass walls, employees gathered silently. Grace Howard stood in the back, arms folded. Logan Pierce, once so smug, slipped quietly into his office. Some stared in shame, some in awe, all in silence. Jasmine finished her presentation with a single sentence. These issues weren't missed because they were hard to find. They were missed because no one looked, and when I did look, I was punished for it. Her attorney stepped in again. My client is now preparing lawsuits for defamation, intentional interference with livelihood, racial and gender-based discrimination, whistleblower retaliation. The reporters scribbled furiously. And then came the final blow. Also, the lawyer added, several former Tech Corp clients are now preparing a class action lawsuit citing technical negligence. Estimated damages already exceed $8 million. Richard sat down, suddenly pale. His hands trembled. Jasmine closed her laptop and looked at him. You thought I was invisible, she said softly. You thought you could erase me. He didn't answer. You're not scared of me, she continued. You're scared of the truth I represent. A truth that people like you have tried to bury for decades. She walked toward the exit, but before she left, she turned one last time. You didn't just underestimate me, Richard. You underestimated what happens when a system fails to silence someone who finally decides to speak. And then she was gone. But the storm she'd brought? It was only beginning. The next day, Tech Corp wasn't a company. It was a crime scene. Not with yellow tape and flashing lights, but with deleted files, emergency meetings, and panicked executives trying to make sense of their unraveling empire. Richard Cole hadn't returned any calls since Jasmine Carter's public audit the day before, because there were no good answers left. The emails were flooding in. So were the contract cancellations. And worse, the shareholders wanted blood. At 7:15 a.m., an emergency board meeting was called. By 7:23, Richard sat alone in a glass-walled conference room, surrounded by men and women who had once praised him for vision and execution. Now, they were watching him like a contagion. The chairman of the board stood up. We've received confirmation that 12 of our top clients have pulled out. 3 more are requesting legal arbitration. 1 has already filed. He paused. And they're all citing the same thing, technical negligence and the audits conducted by Mrs. Jasmine Carter, also known as Kay Williams. Richard swallowed hard. This is a coordinated attack, he said weakly. She's trying to destroy us. No, another board member replied coldly.
You did that all on your own. At that exact moment, on the 21st floor of a building across town, Jasmine Carter stood in a small sunlit office surrounded by truth. Open files, hard drives, documentation, system logs, time-stamped records, and a team of lawyers, engineers, and journalists reviewing every line. She wasn't running anymore. She was leading. The story had already gone viral. Delivery girl turned cyber whistleblower exposes billion-dollar tech giant, read one headline. CTO retaliated against black woman who saved their system. It cost them everything, read another. Jasmine didn't care about the attention. She cared about the impact. Back at Tech Corp, another email hit the executive inboxes. Subject, immediate termination notice. From CARE, Meditech legal team. Due to confirmed evidence of data vulnerability and failure to disclose risk factors, we are terminating all contracts with Tech Corp effective immediately. We reserve the right to pursue legal action related to HIPAA violations. Please consider this notice final. Richard stared at the screen. His fingers trembled over the keyboard. He opened another email. Then another, all the same, all pulling out. All citing her. At 10:44 a.m., Grace Howard received a Slack message from a junior engineer she'd never spoken to. Thank you for standing up. I was in that room. I should have said something too. She stared at the message for a long time, then looked out the window and smiled. Because sometimes courage doesn't start loud. Sometimes it starts with a whisper, and then it spreads like fire. Downstairs in the lobby, Richard was pacing. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his voice strained. She's just a kid, he muttered. A delivery girl with a grudge. But no one was listening anymore, because across the screen in the company's lobby was a live stream Jasmine Carter speaking at a press conference alongside her legal counsel. She stood at the podium in front of a banner that read, "Competence has no color." She didn't speak with fire. She didn't shout. She just stood tall. I didn't come here to tear anyone down, she said. I came to reveal what happens when talent is ignored, when credentials mean more than ability, and when people in power punish others for being right. She held up a flash drive. This contains a record of 23 critical vulnerabilities in systems used by hospitals, schools, and banks. Flaws that were denied, buried, ignored. She looked directly into the camera, and when I pointed it out, I was blacklisted. Not because I was wrong, but because I wasn't the kind of person they expected to be right. The crowd went silent, and then applause erupted, not from the press, but from the people watching online. From coders, from students, from young women who had been told, "You're not qualified," from delivery drivers, from engineers who had been dismissed because of their background, their gender, their accent, their story. Back at Tech Corp, Richard collapsed into his chair as the last of the contracts vanished from the screen. The system Jasmine once saved with a single sentence was now dismantled by her hands, and she never broke a rule, never leaked a password, never raised her voice. She just told the truth and let it echo. Hours later, Jasmine received a message from Grace. He resigned. The board forced it. You did it. Jasmine stared at the screen. Not with celebration, but with quiet relief. Then she texted back, I didn't do it alone. That night, she walked into her mother's room with a soft smile. It's over, she said. Miss Thelma looked up from her blanket. You win? No, Jasmine said gently. We win. 6 months later, the world knew her name. Jasmine Carter. No longer a ghost in the system. No longer the girl with the backpack and calloused hands. She was now the founder and CEO of Secure Code Solutions, one of the fastest growing cybersecurity consulting firms in the country. And her office? It wasn't a shared apartment kitchen with a flickering laptop anymore. It was on the 21st floor, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling glass, overlooking the city that once refused to see her. Behind her desk sat the same laptop she'd coded with on sleepless nights, still scratched, still imperfect. But now resting like an artifact, a reminder of where it all began. She ran her fingers over the corner of it every morning, not out of nostalgia, but out of respect. Respect for the girl who never gave up. Respect for the woman she had become. 17 new contracts this month, said Grace Howard, now her chief operating officer, walking into the office with a stack of documents. 3 of them are former TechCorp clients. Jasmine raised an eyebrow, amused. They finally called back? Actually, they begged, Grace replied with a grin. Apparently, your reports impressed their boards more than Richard Cole's promises ever did. Jasmine chuckled, but not with arrogance. She had learned that victory didn't have to be loud. Sometimes, the sweetest form of justice was doing better than the people who tried to destroy you and never needing to say a word about it. Outside the office, her team was buzzing. Not the usual sterile energy of a corporate floor, but a space alive with collaboration, laughter, and freedom. Her employees came from all walks of life. A black woman from Detroit who had been rejected from 5 tech firms despite having top-tier certifications. A trans engineer from Atlanta who had been passed over for promotions again and again. A deaf coder who built accessibility tools in his spare time but had never been taken seriously in interviews. A Latina single mother who taught herself Python while working night shifts. All of them had heard no too many times. Here, Jasmine gave them their first yes, and they flourished. "What's the word on TechCorp?" Jasmine asked as Grace handed her the last contract of the day. Grace sat down across from her, crossed her legs and smirked. "Bleeding. They've lost 80% of their client base. Their PR team jumped ship. Investors pulled funding. Rumor is they're considering bankruptcy." Jasmine paused, then looked out the window. It wasn't satisfaction she felt. It was clarity. She hadn't set out to ruin TechCorp. She had set out to be seen, to be heard, to be respected. The rest had happened because truth, when spoken at the right time, is unstoppable. "And Richard?" Jasmine asked, not out of malice but curiosity. Grace's face shifted. "He's trying to sue former clients for breach of contract." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "No one's taking it seriously," Grace added. "He's working freelance now, but no one in the industry wants to be associated with him. He's toxic." Jasmine nodded slowly. It was ironic. The man who once said there was a natural hierarchy had now fallen to the bottom of it, not because of who he was, but because of what he did. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Miss Thelma walked into Jasmine's office with a tray of coffee. Her health had improved dramatically. She wore a bright scarf and a smile that never seemed to fade these days. "This place looks like something out of a movie," she said, handing Jasmine a mug. "Your name's even on the door." Jasmine smiled warmly. "Only took years and a few million lines of code." Miss Thelma leaned in, lowering her voice. "That man tried to destroy you because he thought you didn't belong. Now look at you 3 floors above where he once sat." Jasmine didn't laugh. She didn't gloat. She just hugged her mother gently and whispered, "It was never about proving I was better than him. It was about proving that I never needed his permission to be great." At 8 p.m., as most of the team packed up for the night, Jasmine sat in her office alone and reflected. So many memories lived in silence now. The first time she saw her mother cry after chemo. The 3 app deactivations that stripped away her income overnight. The night she began coding her revenge with a shaky hand and blurry eyes. The moment Richard Cole looked at her and said, "You don't belong here." He was wrong. She belonged here all along. The system just hadn't been built with her in mind, so she built her own. As she looked out into the night, her phone buzzed. "A new message. From National Tech Conference. Ms. Carter, we'd be honored to have you speak at this year's keynote. Your story has inspired a generation of coders, engineers, and dreamers. We believe your voice will shape the future of our industry. Jasmine sat back. The same stage where Richard Cole once stood year after year, dismissing people like her. Now it was hers. She tapped out her reply. I'd be honored. I'll speak on one condition. That we stop treating diversity like a charity and start recognizing it for what it is: technical excellence too long ignored. Jasmine Carter. The ballroom at the National Tech Conference was packed. 500 of the industry's top minds, engineers, CTOs, investors, journalists. And at the center of it all, under the gleam of 100 lights, stood a simple podium. It had been home to giants, people who built companies, shaped code bases, and in some cases, shaped culture. And now, it was waiting for someone new. Jasmine Carter. Backstage, Jasmine adjusted the microphone on her blazer. She wasn't nervous. She had spoken truth in rooms colder than this. In delivery lobbies, in server rooms, in glass-walled offices where people laughed before they listened. Today, they were listening from the start. Ladies and gentlemen, the host announced, please welcome our keynote speaker, founder and CEO of Secure Code Solutions, Jasmine Carter. As she stepped onto the stage, a standing ovation met her. But she didn't pause. She didn't bask. She walked straight to the podium, placed her hands firmly on both sides, and looked out across the room. Not to impress them, but to remind them. I used to walk into tech buildings through the back door, she began. As a delivery girl, soft laughter rippled through the room. I walked into control centers with a bag of food, not a badge. I saw people glance at me like I didn't belong. And the moment I opened my mouth, they confirmed it for me. She paused. One day, I saw a system crash. 20 engineers couldn't solve it. I saw the error code and gave a suggestion. They laughed. But the system came back online in 2 minutes. Now the room was silent. Instead of gratitude, I was punished. My income erased, my name smeared. All because I wasn't who they expected to be right. She let that truth settle. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Because now the industry wasn't hearing a story, they were feeling a reckoning. You know what I learned from that moment, Jasmine continued? I learned that competence doesn't always look like a Stanford degree or a corner office. Sometimes it looks like a girl coding at 3 a.m. on a second-hand laptop while her mum sleeps beside her during chemo. A few in the crowd wiped tears. That moment didn't break me. It built me. She clicked the remote. The screen behind her lit up. Secure Code Solutions, 45 employees. 22 major clients, 0 tolerance for bias. When I started my company, I didn't want to hire the most polished resumes. I wanted to hire the people you missed. The people whose brilliance had been dimmed by someone else's doubt. Applause broke out. Not polite, proud. Back across town, Richard Cole sat alone in a cramped apartment. His luxury condo was long gone, his reputation buried under lawsuits, leaked recordings, and broken contracts. He watched Jasmine's speech from a cracked laptop, the same way she once watched security lectures from her kitchen floor. But there was no fire in his eyes, only regret. He had once stood on that very stage, but the world had changed, and he hadn't. Back at the conference, Jasmine closed her speech with a single truth. If you want to build systems that last, you don't start with walls, you start with windows, because real innovation comes from people you've never seen, from voices you've talked over, from minds too humble to demand attention, but too powerful to stay invisible forever. Another standing ovation. This time, longer, louder. No one sat back down for several minutes, not because Jasmine was flawless, but because she had shown them what real strength looked like. Not vengeance, not pride. Purpose. Later that night, Jasmine sat in her quiet office, the conference badge still around her neck. Miss Thelma walked in, holding a newspaper. Front page headline, she was a delivery girl. Now, she's rewriting the future of tech. She handed it to Jasmine. Her daughter smiled softly.
It's not about rewriting the future, Jasmine said. It's about making sure no one like me gets erased from it again. On her desk, a letter waited. It was from a young girl in Kansas.
15 years old. Black, self-taught coder. Rejected from 3 summer camps. It read, "Dear Ms. Carter, they told me I wasn't ready. But after watching you, I think maybe they're just not ready for me. Thank you. Fish, Ava M." Jasmine folded the letter, placed it in a drawer labeled, "Why I Started." Then she turned back to her screen. Because the work wasn't done. The world still had systems to fix. But now, they had someone leading the charge. In a world that often judges by appearances and titles, the story of Jasmine Carter reminds us of a timeless truth. Competence has no color, no uniform, no degree. She was dismissed as a delivery girl unseen, unheard, underestimated. Yet through quiet resilience and unwavering integrity, she exposed injustice, rewrote the rules, and built something far greater than revenge. She built a new standard. For older generations, her journey is a powerful reminder that real strength isn't loud, it's steady, humble, and rooted in purpose. It's never too late to believe in those who are overlooked, or to become that believer yourself. Whether you're mentoring a younger voice, fighting your own quiet battles, or standing up for what's right, Jasmine's story shows us that dignity, courage, and truth still carry weight. In the end, she didn't just win a fight. She restored faith in fairness, in persistence, and in the power of one voice to change everything. Hoi ChatGPT,